Sir, we are live now. We are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Santosh Parasar from ASSOCHAM. I very warmly welcome all of you to ASSOCHAM Corporate Governance Symposium Series 5 on Effective Stakeholders Relationship Committee, Emerging Trends, Challenges and the Way Forward. Broadly, as we know that the corporates do not operate only for the benefit of promoters or shareholders, but also to the benefit of society as a whole. We know that the concept of governance is all about considering goodness. We have examples of promoters and people at helm of not only East India Company, but also there are the examples of several others, where the priority for protection of stakeholders' interest was secondary or tertiary or none at several times. Though the time had changed, but instances of similar practices where stakeholders feel and they report that they too have been deceived and they are unprotected, and such instances keep coming from time to time. It's all about awareness of stakeholders as to what are their best practices from expected from corporate side as well as from their side. What are the corporate governance best practices prevailing and evolving, and how the regulators are there to help protect them, and then due to which they start speaking about their rights. The foremost important is that to know whether the stakeholders do understand and know about stakeholders relationship committee that exist in the organization wherein they have their interest, and also equally that the members of SRC also they do know that who are their stakeholders or not. So aligned around these lines and the particular towards broadly covering the whole corporate governance, we have started a series on corporate governance symposium with term effective word in view of the emerging trends in the practices of SRC as well as challenges being faced by SRC in framing, implementing and having the oversight of the policies and their role in strengthening the overall corporate governance frameworks in the organizations. We are organizing this symposium series 5. We are honored to have very eminent guests who have joined with us. We have Dr. S.K. Gupta, former MD and CEO, Insolvency Professional Agency of ICNI and MD RBO of Institute of Cost Accountants of India. We welcome you, sir. We have joined by CS Manoj Sonawala, Principal Consultant, Manoyog GRC Advisors Private Limited. We welcome you, sir. We have with us Mr. Rajinder Kumar. He's an advisor legal with Indus Tower Limited. We have been joined by Mr. Sri Ram Subramaniam, founder and managing director in Governed Research Services Private Limited. We have with us Advocate GP Madan, managing partner, Madan Law Offices. Dr. M. Narendra, former CMD, Indian Overseas Bank and advisor in Cube Collaborations. We have with us Mr. Vasudev Mukherjee, Assistant Secretary General, ASSOCHAM. Mr. Vijay Sachdeva, Co-Chairman, ASSOCHAM National Council for Corporate Affairs, Company Law and Corporate Governance, and he is the Deputy National Leader, North Risk Advisory Services with Harivatti and Company LLP. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I would like to welcome all of you and extend thanks for joining us this afternoon. At the outset, again, I would like to invite now Mr. Vasudev Mukherjee, Assistant Secretary General, ASSOCHAM, for your opening remarks and welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Vasudev Mukherjee, please.
Committee. The key to good corporate governance is to conduct business in a way that the stakeholder rights and interests are protected. Transparency is maintained. Sensitive information is dealt with utmost care and ensure that the trust and confidence of the stakeholders in the company stays intact. The board of the company is considered to be responsible for keeping the overall corporate governance flag high, but the stakeholder relationship committee has to play a big role towards resolving the grievances of the security holders as well as to protect the rights of other stakeholders in the listed companies. The COVID-19 pandemic has triggered a variety of business, financial, and operating issues and challenges to the organizations. This is in the context of the oversight role of the SRC, that the fundamental rights of stakeholders should be given on the verge of strategic agendas, and that global best practices co-evolve with the severity of the pandemic would empower the committees to combat the new challenges and risks. I welcome you to the fifth event in the series of ASSOCHAM, which focuses broadly on enhancing the level of corporate governance in India. I believe that the symposium will benefit a larger section of the business fraternity and corporates who are attending this event. Once again, I warmly welcome and thank you to you all for joining this session. Thank you.
Now, may I request Dr. S.K. Gupta, sir, to please take over the session and give your opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Namaskar. At the outset, I sincerely compliment ASSOCHAM for organizing and running a series of corporate governance symposiums dealing with different facets and different aspects of the multidimensional relationship between elements and the corporate governance for a corporate entity. I warmly welcome all the co-panelists with me in this panel discussion on effective stakeholder relationships committee, emerging trends, challenges, and the way forward, in which all of us are jointly going to deliberate on stakeholder relationship committee, its effectiveness in challenging times such as the COVID-19 pandemic situation, the roles, rights, and responsibilities of the members of SRC, strategies for mitigating threats faced by SRC, regulatory provisions concerning SRC under the Companies Act 2013, and also listing obligation and disclosure requirements 2015. And of course, we will also be sharing best practices from the global perspective and from the global arena. It's a wide canvas of topics that we have slated for our discussion this afternoon. And with eminent learned panelists along with me, I'm sure this is going to provide a lot of food for thought for all of us as well as for all the various participants. Before we start the panel discussion, and I invite each one of the panelists one after the other to share their perspective, let me just set the ball rolling and give some opening remarks and opening views on the subject. You know, we all would tend to agree that our stakeholders are our business. Whatever we do, the very reason, the very purpose why the business exists in the environment is because they have certain responsibilities and certain obligations, certain expectations from the various stakeholders, which are both internal as well as external. In fact, the stakeholders principle arises from the basic concept of agency theory, which basically postulates and states that owners are separate and the managers who run the affairs of the corporate entity are different set of people. And thus, with a view to ensuring that they always act in the best interest of all the stakeholders, there need to be certain kinds of checks and balances in place, both legalized, provided by the law, maybe by the regulations of SEBI or the stock exchanges. And of course, it has also to come as part of the voluntary effort on the part of the corporate managers to be able to meet the expectations of the stakeholders. We are all aware that there exist various groups or set of people who are intermittently connected with the functioning and working of the corporate entities. These individual groups are referred to as internal and external stakeholders. Law mandates constitution of a stakeholder relationship committee of the board. The main objective of this committee is to look into and address the various concerns faced by the stakeholders or maybe various grievances that they would have against certain set of people or against certain set of actions and decisions taken by the corporates. The listed entities are required to constitute a stakeholder relationship committee to look into the various aspects of interest of shareholders, debenture holders, and other security holders. Let's look at the genesis of the term stakeholders. Where does the term arise from? The term stakeholder has been used ever since 1930s when a Harvard professor publicly supported identification of four major groups of business stakeholders, namely shareholders, employees, customers, and general public. In 1963, Stanford Research Institute used the term to refer to those groups without whose support the organization would cease to exist. Very important. Stakeholder without whose support the organization would cease to exist. The failure to establish and maintain ongoing engagement, dialogue, and productive relationship with the various stakeholders of the company is a sine qua non or the basic essential requirement for building up a sustainable and growing business in 21st century. Increasingly, businesses are moving from informing and responding to involving stakeholders in the decision making and operations of the company. You inform shareholders and other stakeholders by way of a stakeholders newsletter, maybe by way of annual report, maybe quarterly conferencing, whatever. And you also respond to them in terms of their concerns, issues, and queries from time to time. But the companies are going one step forward now, and they're actually trying to get the stakeholders involved in the operations of the company, in the decision making, because all the decisions which are taken by the company are directly or indirectly going to impact the stakeholders. Particularly for those companies without stakeholder representation in the boardroom, some mechanism is needed to ensure that stakeholder views are concerned and taken into account while taking various decisions with regard to the functioning of the corporate entity. So the point is that stakeholder relationship committee plays a very vital role in bringing about a better rapport, addressing various concerns and grievances of the various stakeholders with a view to facilitating better relationship between the stakeholders and the corporate entity, and which of course augurs well for sustained profitable growth of the company over a period of time going into future. With this brief perspective on the topic for discussion today, I am privileged to have with me very, very learned, experienced panelists on this panel discussion, starting with CS Manoj Sonawala, Principal Consultant, Manojog GRC Advisors Private Limited, Mr. Rajendra Kumar, Advisor Legal Indus Towers Limited, Mr. Shri Ram Subramaniam, Founder and Managing Director, InGovern Research Services Private Limited, Dr. Narendra Mairpadi, former Chief Chairman and Managing Director, Indian Overseas Bank and Advisor, Ncube Collaborations, and of course, Advocate GP Madan, Managing Partner, Madan Law Offices. To set the ball rolling, let me first introduce and request Advocate GP Madan sir to kindly share his perspective on the theme for discussion today afternoon, that is effective stakeholders relationship committee. What are the trends emerging in the marketplace, and what are the challenges being faced by this committee, and what is the way forward? Over to Advocate GP Madan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. As I requested in the beginning, can I be the last one in the list, because my
Fine.
one hearing is going to start, please.
I thought you wanted to be the first one.
I wanted to be the last one,
Thank
please.
you.
My
Sure, no
apologies,
problem.
please.
No problem. So I would instead request CS Manoj Sonawala to kindly share his perspective on the theme of today afternoon's deliberation on Stakeholder Relationship Committee. CS Manoj Sonawala, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. Thank you, Parasarji and Srivastava sir, for giving me the opportunity. As you rightly said, as in his opening remark, Mr. Santosh Parasar has rightly said, the word effective is very critical in the entire symposium. And as Dr. Gupta suggested, stakeholders are the reason or the purpose for business in which we have. So they are not the hurdles, or they are not the spike makers who try to spike our business or derail our business. So
Mr.
for
Manoj
purpose-
Sonawala, please, you can start, please.
Yeah, I have already started. Hello, am I audible?
मनोज जी आपका वॉइस थोड़ा बहुत स्लो लो है
Okay. Sorry. Now it is okay.
हाँ नाउ इट इज ओके
Now
Fine.
it is fine, sure.
Fine. Okay. So I'll start again. First of all, thank you very much, ASSOCHAM, Mr. Parashar and Dr. Gupta for the nice introduction. I would say ki, as in his opening remark, Mr. Parashar has suggested the word effective in the entire symposium is very critical, because this is a 6 or 7 year old committee formation and all the rules and regulations pertaining to this. But the effectiveness of the entire committee, that is a stakeholder committee, is the most critical and important in the entire discussion of today's matter. Now, as Mr. Gupta has suggested, stakeholders are the reason or the purpose for the business in which we have. They are the reason for which we are into business, and they are not the hurdles, or they are not the people who are making our life miserable. So we should take them with pride. If there are any grievances, those grievances should be on a very priority basis, should be attended. Now, when I say this, the stakeholder committee should be transparent in their all activities and actions, and make it more comfortable. All the stakeholders here, I mean all the shareholders, debenture holders, or any other security holders, and for that there is a mechanism available. Now, SEBI has come out for listed companies. SEBI has come out with the scores platform, and other companies, they have a direct, I would say, direct possibility of getting all the complaints. Now, whenever we get, means as a company, we get a direct any complaints or any complaints through scores, it should be on a priority. It should be addressed, and for that, mechanism has to be established and published in the on the website, so that people know who is the compliance officer, who is the person to which they can appeal, and all that. With this, I would reserve my other comments for later part. Thank you very much, Gupta ji.
Thank you, Mr. Manoj Sonawala. So, as you rightly mentioned, engaging with stakeholders has governance implications because it actually goes to the heart of how power and authority are understood and used within the company for the benefit of all the stakeholders connected and concerned with the company's operations. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I would now request Mr. Rajinder Kumar, Advisor Legal, Indus Towers Limited, to share his views on the theme of the today's deliberation, that is effective stakeholders relationship committee. Mr. Rajinder Kumar, please.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, please. Good
Oh,
afternoon.
okay. Good afternoon. I'm sorry, I think I was earlier on. So good afternoon, and thank you ASSOCHAM, Santosh ji, Vikas, for organizing this corporate governance symposium on effective stakeholder relationship committee and inviting me to share my thoughts on this important topic. So the focus of this discussion is how we can make this committee, stakeholders relationship committee, effective. So I would therefore not just after touching briefly about the legal statutory provisions of the Companies Act and SEBI LODR, I will quickly then shift on to the effectiveness of the committee. So Section 178, subsection 5 provides that the board of directors of a company which has more than 1,000 shareholders or any other debenture holders or other security holders, they in any financial year, they will constitute a SRC, and the chairperson shall be a non-executive director. And such other members will be also inducted as the may be decided by the board. The SRC shall consider, now this is subsection 6 of section 178 talks about that the SRC shall consider and resolve the grievances of the security holders of the company. So this is the scope of the SRC as per the Companies Act. The chairperson or other members authorized by him shall attend the annual general meeting. The purpose of this is to answer any questions that these shareholders may have in the general meeting pertaining to their issues. And subsections 8 of this section 178 is very important, which says what are the penalties. So if there is a contravention of any of these provisions, the penalty, is that the company shall be punishable with fine, which is not less than 1 lakh, but which may go up to 5 lakhs. And every officer of the company who is in default shall be punishable with imprisonment up to 1 year, or fine, which will not be less than 25,000, but which may go up to 1 lakh, or both. So this itself, signifies the importance and criticality of this committee and the role that has been assigned. That there is even a criminal provisions and liability attached to it. The only exception which is provided here is for exclusion from the contravention is that if some issue is not considered or resolved by this committee in good faith, that will not be considered a violation. Otherwise, all the things, therefore need to be attended to on priority, and all the grievances of the stakeholders need to be addressed and resolved. Another interesting part, which is an emerging trend on this subject, I just want to draw the attention, is the SEBI LODR regulations 2015 were amended in 2018, and with effect from 1/4/2019, the scope of this committee has been actually, in my view, enlarged. And now it says, so earlier, prior to this, it was provided that this committee will look into the mechanism of redressal of grievances of the stakeholders. The amendment which has been made in 2019 with effect from 1st April 2019, that says this committee shall look into various aspects of interest of shareholders, debenture holders and other security holders. Therefore, it is not merely a grievance redressal committee, but there is a more proactive role assigned to this committee, which is various aspects of interest of shareholders. So I think this is a paradigm shift and a very important trend which has been there. The second pertinent change by the same amendment was that the committee, the Act does not provide, Act only says the chairman will be a non-executive director and other directors as may be decided by the board. But this amendment provides that the committee should consist of at least 3 directors, with at least 1 being an independent director who will be the members of this committee. And where the company has outstanding SR equity shares, special rights equity shares, then in that case, 2/3 of the committee members shall be independent directors. So this change is important from the sense of bringing in independence into the stakeholders committee, so that the dominance or the vested interest of the promoters, etc., does not influence the decisions too much. And then the third change which has been brought is the committee shall meet at least once in a year. The Act did not say that. So these 3 changes have come. I think these are positive trends. Now, what is regarding the role of SRC? Of course, we said redressing grievances, including those relating to transfer, transmission of shares, etc. Then review of measures taken for effective exercise of voting rights by shareholders, review of adherence to the service standards adopted by the company in various services being rendered by the registrar and share transfer agents, and review of various measures and initiatives taken by the company for reducing the quantum of unclaimed dividends and ensuring timely receipt of dividend, etc. So this is basically the role of the SRC and the members. And therefore, this committee has a very, very important role with regard to. Now, I think I would straight dive into that how we can make this committee effective. And in my experience, as I have seen in these various companies, so first of all, one of the challenge or limit, if I may say limitation, is that the scope as defined under the Act or the regulations is limited to the security holder. So stakeholder whose grievances are contemplated here is a security holder. So he should be some security holder. But today, as Mr. Gupta also pointed out, and it was pointed
Yes.
out earlier, that stakeholders are varied and many. And you gave example of 1930, that we have customers, we have vendors, we have employees, banks and financial institutions, government agencies, and the community. Therefore, I think the committee can be really made effective, and then nothing stops. The law does not come in the way if we include these stakeholders to be governed by this committee to as a specific task. That is one point. Second, which I find is the lack. There is a generally it is felt that there is a lack of representation of the shareholders in this committee. So in this regard, there is one provision in section 151 which mandates appointment of director by the small shareholders. So though it is optional, but as a good corporate governance, if the company appoints, this will give a lot of sense of satisfaction to the retail shareholders, small shareholders, that there is somebody who is there to focus on protection of their interests exclusively. Third, I think in my experience, which I have seen, is the stakeholders. The challenge which sometimes is faced is that there is a lack of defined policy with regard to how this committee will function, etc. Therefore, it will be pertinent that this committee and how the members are going to be appointed, what will be the method of the monitoring, and what will be the regularity by which all these procedures and the grievances will be handled, what will be the technology platforms and other procedural aspects. So if a well-defined policy is there, that can that can solve so many other problems as well. Sometimes it is seen in my personal experience that the directors who are appointed on this committee, they are not that much familiar with the affairs of the company or the operations of the company. So I think it will be good if the directors of these committees are familiarized. There is some induction program to make this committee really effective, so that when they sit there, they really know what is the concern and how that can be dealt with. Another challenge which I have seen sometimes is the terms of reference of this committee when these committees are constituted. That is not very well documented and defined, and therefore it would be fruitful to make this committee effective that the terms of reference are made exhaustive and powers and responsibilities of the SRC are very well defined. Another point which I think can make this committee effective is law requires that this committee should meet once in a year. But in my experience and when I was managing these committees, we were doing it on a quarterly basis, so that along with other audit committee, CSR and NRC committee, we conduct the stakeholder review committee as well. The another important thing is the act does not provide at within how much period the grievance of the stakeholders should be resolved. So this is a very important point, and therefore that sometimes goes unnoticed, and the effectiveness of the committee becomes suspect. So it will be excellent if the policy that we make for the company that prescribes the timelines considering the priority of the grievances. So I think that is one my suggestion. Another suggestion of mine on this is protecting the exposure of the stakeholder relationship committee. As I mentioned, any action which is not in good faith and the complaint is not resolved, then there is a penalty which is attracted as per section 178 subsection 8. Therefore, it would be good that when the committee deals or is not able to resolve any complaint or resolve any concern of a stakeholder, it should record detailed reasons as to why the grievance could not be handled, so that it will go a long way to afford the ground of good faith which is available. Now, coming just in my view, talking about the global best practices, I think there are 2 points which I would like to make. Some companies are adopting positive stakeholder relationship strategy, and Mr. Gupta commented that we should identify and prioritize the stakeholders, clearly communicate with them, gain their trust right from the start, consistent in our communication and messaging. And some of the companies are also following the stakeholder engagement assessment metrics, which is a simple yet powerful management technique to document desired and actual engagement level of stakeholders, and therefore it identifies what is the gap between the expected levels, and that is the scientific technology. So to conclude, I would like to say that the stakeholder theory of corporate governance focuses on all identifiable stakeholders and addressing their needs and culture. And the Unilever, in my view, is one example where what they have said is that our purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace, and we are on a mission to prove that sustainable business is good business, but we can't do this alone. To make our purpose a reality and grow our business, we need to work closely with our stakeholders, our people, our consumers, shareholders, government and regulators, suppliers, etc. And therefore, this universal, they call it Unilever Compass, explains the multi-stakeholder model and how how it delivers value to all stakeholders. I think that is what I want to, as an initial thought, submit how to make this committee effective.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rajendra Kumar, for giving a broad perspective and wide spectrum of suggestions as well for improving effectiveness of stakeholders relationship committee. I think the timelines is one of the critical elements that must be provided in the internal policy framed by the corporate entities in order to deal with stakeholder concerns and issues. It's not only enough and sufficient to present statistics, how many grievances were received, how many were resolved, how many are still unresolved, but it is also important probably to identify what have been the timelines involved in the entire process of considering and resolving the grievances, concerns, and issues of the stakeholders. That point is well taken. Thank you so much. I would now request Mr. Sriram Subramanian, founder and managing director in Govern Research Services Private Limited, to share his perspectives with regard to the theme of today's deliberation, that is effective stakeholders relationship committee, emerging trends, challenges, and the way forward. Mr. Sriram Subramaniam, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for that kind introduction. And I'm happy to be amongst eminent panel members and speak and address the audience here. And firstly, of course, as some of the speakers said before, stakeholder relationship has changed. The name itself encompasses the proactive nature of the scope of the committee itself that has changed. Previously, it used to be a shareholder grievance committee, so and there were only shareholder grievances that were addressed. Now it has changed scope. And in fact, in a study that we did for the Nifty 50 companies, and I will just put it up on the screen just now. Sir, 1 second. And so what we have for the Nifty 50 companies, we saw that many Nifty 50 companies are including or extending the remit of the stakeholder relationship committee to much more beyond what is already stated by law, right? I mean, if you look at Dr. Reddy's, they have said this committee will review engagement plans and initiative and movements in shareholders and ownership structures. Just 1 second, I'll share the screen and let us see how whether we are able to see. I hope everyone is able to see.
Yes, got it, please. Got it. Yeah.
Yes. So if you see, Dr. Reddy's has said review engagement, investor engagement plans, initiatives, and movements in shareholders and ownership structures. HDFC has said various initiatives taken by the corporates in a timely receipt of annual report of shareholders, though it is still procedural in nature, but effective e-voting of shareholders, which was done by way of sending reminders, etc. Infosys has said the committee shall has the authority to appoint, remove, obtain advice and assistance from internal and external legal, accounting, and other advisors, as well as on an annual basis review the company's performance in dealing with stakeholder grievances. All right. Reliance has said, Reliance has included, in fact, monitoring of the prohibition of insider trading. Okay. So Tata Motors has said, suggest and implement various investor-friendly initiatives. So this could be even, for that matter, a shareholder satisfaction survey, which has been Tata Motors has said they will conduct. So this is, in a way, if you see how many companies are conducting a shareholders satisfaction survey, not many. In fact, last year when during the ICSI Corporate Governance Awards, where I was a panel member and I had interviewed independent directors of for some large Nifty 50 companies, I had the same discussion with the independent directors, and these are eminent people, and their feedback was yes, probably something that is required, because at the end of the day, how does a board even get feedback from the shareholders? Many a time, even at AGMs, independent directors are not speaking on behalf of the company or otherwise. It is largely the executive directors who are speaking. Do independent directors even get an opportunity to interact with large institutional investors? It's never the it's not often that it happens, and we don't know of even many instances that happens, or there are not even any opportunities for that to happen. So I'm saying that when a company conducts a shareholder satisfaction survey, there is a sort of feedback from investors, and it may not necessarily be just the institutional investors with which the IR team goes and interacts, right? This is sort of an independent satisfaction survey where a shareholder is able to give almost anonymous feedback to the company on how their outreach, how the company's outreach to shareholders is. And of course, Tech Mahindra here has said, review the complaints received from other stakeholders, such as vendors, suppliers, service providers, customers. And this is where some speaker said the remit probably has moved from just being shareholders or even security holders, who include bondholders and other security holders, to other stakeholders in the company, such as vendors, suppliers, service providers, customers, etc. So I think the remit of the committee itself is evolving, and by legally itself, SEBI has already made the change in the scope of the committee. But I think, and Tech Mahindra, for example, has even broadened it to say environment, health, and safety. So probably over a period of time, we'll see that this committee will adopt much more, even the ESG norms which the company publishes. One of my grievances against Indian companies have been like they are publishing ESG now. Everyone, with the onset of BRSR reports, everyone is madly after ESG. But at the end of the day, whether at a ground level, is there traceability, and is there really effective ESG practices by your company, etc. And that has to be monitored at a board level. Now companies have set up, probably some companies have set up ESG committees itself, but here in Tech Mahindra case, they have sort of given that remit to the stakeholder relationship committee. And then Ultratech has said more monitoring the blank and printing stationery required by the secretarial department for the issue of so if you see, this is sort of voluntary inclusions that we found in Nifty 50 companies. But I think more importantly, this sort of gives a view into what all companies will take up in future in the first place. One, two is probably even regulatory. Some of these will evolve and become regulatory mandates for other companies as there is more and more asked from the stakeholder relationship committee. That is the perspective. The other speakers before me have shared many more views. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to take any questions later.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your perspectives as well as some of the leading case studies from the corporate space in India as to what they are doing in this particular space, going beyond the remit of the law and getting into the spirit to provide and encompass wider category of stakeholders into its domain. Thank you so much. I would now request Dr. Narendra M., former Chairman and Managing Director, Indian Overseas Bank, and advisor, N-Cube Collaborations, to kindly share his perspective and views on the theme of today's deliberation. Dr. M. Narendra, please.
Thank you, sir. And S.K. Gupta ji, as well as Santosh Parsar. I should congratulate ASSOCHAM that in a series of regarding governance and whatever various committees' role, this particular webinar is being conducted, and it's really what you call appreciable that the entire series is there. So we must publish a booklet covering all the proceedings, and that should be made available to all the members of the ASSOCHAM and others also. And all the other speakers have already spoken, and I pick up some of the points from there. So as earlier one of the speakers mentioned about the interest of the stakeholders. So I also feel that interest of the what you call equity or whatever debenture holders as well as equity investors. And another area which I just now presented by Subramaniam Saab, that the entire other stakeholders also, how responsive we are, even though we may not review that, but the company should be a responsive to the all the other stakeholders like customers or internal customers like employees and all of those other external people who deal with the company. They must get a unique experience in terms of their response and positiveness, and that will add value to the company as a whole. So that is the one area where that's where even in wherever I am the some of the director of the some of the companies, I have also introduced that the overall performance of the company in the share market, how the value of the our company's share prices are moving, and how it has been in relation to the benchmark index of that particular overall BSC or NS index, as well as the particular sector wise index, how the these particular share has moved. That also will give that how the investors or other stakeholders are valuing this company in terms of their appreciation for the other than the real material events taking place. That also adds to that. So that is another one evaluation we do. Similarly, I have also suggested that who are the top 10 shareholders and how are their composition in the shareholder ownership, how they are changing, and including the promoters holding, and if there are any pledging of the shares, how that is also being monitored. Now the top 10 shareholders movement will give us how they are continuing to stay with this company, or are they in any time reducing the stake. If that they're thinking what happened in terms of our value proposition, their interest in this company, and what was the event triggered, or is it a mere profit booking. So that is another way of seeing how the saver equity investors are having that type of relationship with the company. Similarly, we also review that in that particular quarter, who are the top purchasers and who are the top sellers. Now, if the top 10 purchasers, you know who are likely to have enhancing their equity in the company, and are the real, even in the institutional, whether foreign or domestic, are the real quality institutional investors from the India and abroad. Are they coming to the company, and whether there is a what you call a trend set that even a very reputed institution who was not having the equity, suddenly he has taken. So that shows that the company is proving to be a quality company for them into invest. So that type of, or somebody is generally trying to amass lot of shares, that also the as a board of directors as well as the company should know what type of interest is being evinced in terms of their share percentage share going up. So that also we do. Then of course we also do into what are the new debenture or NCD, whether secured or unsecured issued during that particular quarter, and what is the coupon payable, and even in terms of the coupon, how that is reflected in the value of the company, and of course in relation to the rating as well as the what you call value of the company. Similarly, whether it is raised money in India or abroad, that could also be monitored in that, other than the normal whatever stated, like if there are general complaint, grievous industrial, all that. I also suggest that the share transfer or registrar and transfer agent, as well as the debenture trustee, we must also monitor their performance. And if there are SEBI related any inspection, as a company, we must be able to get a certain report, what are those irregularities, or the in terms of the technological what you call preparedness of that company, and the response time, or if there are any major defects. But it may be when you are entrusting as a transfer agent, you at least to the extent of your company's data there, has been anywhere no, in terms of the data privacy also, in so many issues that could also be seen, but I have not tried that. But that may be another area we should be able to see, because it all has got the interest of the stakeholders. uh, Apart from that, of course, that whether another dividend payment, how timely we are paying, and quite a lot of time there are addresses are changed, there are bank mandates is changed, and people like common people like also sometimes we fail to inform, and it so happens the dividend is not paid even though you are entitled for that. Similarly, in the coupon payment also in debenture. Now it may be easy that okay, unclaimed, and you then after certain time you transfer to the investor protection fund, all that. But it will so happen quite a lot of them would have been deprived of that. So the company should make all attempt to, in terms of finding out uh, the mandate also, and also the overall addresses to see, even though the intimation is going. Of course, today it's all technology, but even then the updation is sometimes lacking. And similarly, in the the deceased shareholder, in terms of the legal heirs, quite a lot of people may not know what are the guidelines to follow. Now, what type of efforts every listed company is taking to give the awareness about the investor, and quite a lot of shares are just held without getting transfer. I myself know some cases, some of our people could not get that done, and after a long time they would have got access to their parents or other share, and they are not knowing how to do it. So the overall the ethical value of the company, the governance structure of the company, its compliance culture, all that value proposition also. Of course, we being independent director, we will be in various committees and also the board level, but that also will have an impact in terms of the investors value proposition. And there also a few aspects which otherwise we review in the board level or in respective committee level, as a in the stakeholder committee also a particular inquiry could be done how these things are also. And we are, once we or familiarize that, we get to know also. And the every director in every place of the committee, there can be some improvements beyond the statutory requirements. If it is implemented, I am sure the companies also appreciating. I found that companies don't find any difficulty. Similarly, there are new subsidiaries, new associates, new joint venture, all that are being done. Now, how are they going to have value proposition to the holding company shareholders, or the in a future date how the holding company gets in the 100% subsidiary and all, and how are their interests are taken care in every aspect. There must be can be some reference point of discussion in the alternative committee, so that also will add value to the stakeholders. With this, I will come back later.
Thank you so much, sir, for very practical ideas and innovative suggestions for making stakeholders relationship committee effective. In fact, the very fact that there is a law which mandates constitution of stakeholder relationship committee for certain companies and certain class of companies, it recognizes the fact that businesses are interdependent entities. They are impacted by and they are impacting the various stakeholders who are concerned and connected with the various activities and operations of the company. And going beyond the economic dimension, that's only looking at the stock market price or the market value or the market cap or things like that. The health, safety, environment, society, I think these are very, very important concerns from the practical point of view of stakeholders. And this committee going forward, maybe it is slightly over and above and beyond the remit of the law, but this is what is going to be the way forward for best governed companies. Look into these issues very carefully, because we were earlier talking about triple bottom line. That means a corporate company's performance is judged not only on the basis of one single P, that is profit, but also planet and people, to which now another P has been got added, and that's pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic situation has changed the way we live our life and the way we work in different organizations. So the companies going forward have to take care of all these four Ps, because each one of these represents a set of stakeholders behind these particular dimensions. So thank you very much, sir, for your very practical suggestions. I would now request Advocate GP Madan, sir, to kindly share his perspective with regard to the theme of today's deliberation, effective stakeholders relationship committee. What are the emerging trends? What are the challenges? And what does he feel to be the way forward in this direction towards better corporate governance in companies? Advocate GP Madan, sir.
Thank you, Dr. S.K. Gupta. And at the outset, my compliments to ASSOCHAM, the Corporate Affairs Committee led by Ms. Preeti Malhotra and Mr. Vijay Sachdeva, and the Secretariat led by Mr. Santosh Parashar. The fifth symposium on this effectiveness of the committees, 4 statutory committees, and the 5th committee as mandated by LODR, that is Risk Management Committee. And I'm happy that, really privileged that I've been part of out of these 5, I've been part of the 4 events. Thanks to you, Mr. Santosh Parashar and all your team members. Now, in the beginning, I would like to give my disclaimer that I'm going to speak on how to make this committee more effective and what can be the expectations from this committee. I'm giving a disclaimer that these are my personal views and not of the ASSOCHAM, because some of my views may not be liked by the corporates. And I'm really thankful to Dr. M. Narendra that he shared his practical views and practical thoughts, mind-boggling. And the analysis which has been done by Mr. Shriram Subramaniam of the corporate governance reports of various corporates, it's amazing. Mr. Subramaniam, I'll request if you can share this analysis for the benefit of all of us, if it's not a privileged document.
No, thank you. I will subsequently share to this meeting. I'll send it to Mr. Santosh Parashar and his team, and he can subsequently share it with others. Even all the participants in this. I mean, it's a public document. It's available on.
Actually, that is giving us a lead that what can be included, what can be the terms of reference of this committee.
Right.
Yeah.
If we combine all these, whatever you have done, this is a remarkable job. If we combine all this, and then on the basis of that, if a consolidated paper can be prepared, and as Dr. M. Narendra suggested, if even a book can be prepared, and from if ASSOCHAM we can give this suggestion that these should be the inclusions, or these are the terms of reference of stakeholders consultation committee.
Yeah.
That is a wonderful contribution from your side and from ASSOCHAM.
Definitely, sir. I mean, this is a company of which I'm a founder, another company called Simplify. We have a SaaS-based software for compliance with the Companies Act. We had come out with a report on the terms of reference for all the subcommittees of the board, which includes the audit committee, the NRC, and the SRC. And we had studied the Nifty 50 companies, and I just put out the terms of reference which these various companies had put out as voluntary inclusions.
Thank you so much. Now coming to this, if I remember correctly, that earlier the name of this committee was Shareholders Grievance Committee, which were later on changed to Stakeholders Relationship Committee. So the term shareholder gets replaced with the stakeholders, and grievance gets replaced with relationship. Wonderful, remarkable change. But somehow, somewhere we have lagged, as since beginning we have been discussing and well started by Dr. S.K. Gupta, that what exactly is the meaning of this term stakeholders. Yeah. Here actually we have confined to investors. and not to the whole community of stakeholders.
Absolutely.
When we talk about corporate governance, we expect that board of the company shall be there to take care of the interest of all the stakeholders of the corporate. But here, through this committee, though the name is stakeholders, but we have confined ourselves to security holders, shareholders, debenture holders, and other security holders, that's all. But whether in these things, are we supposed to confine to these three terms only? Because what is there as far terms of reference of the committee is concerned, that whether the annual report has been received or not, whether are there any issues regarding transfer and transmission of shares, or consolidation of shares, or subdivision of shares, or printing of shares, or non-receipt of dividend. You see that in this digital era, most of these things, most of these complaints are no more there. If the shares are in demat, if the securities are in demat, there is no question of having any issue in transfer and transmission. Particularly in transfer and transmission, still may be some issues because somebody has died and has left the shares in or security in physical mode. Certainly there may be some issues. But in this digital era, now the government has relaxed the provisions with respect to the holding of AGM as well as supply of the annual report through email only. So even if this reference is not material nowadays, somebody has not received the annual report. I mean, if you're holding your shares in demat form, your email ID is there, the company will be sending the annual report without any expenditure to your email ID. Now, it may be in your inbox or it may be in your spam box. That's the only possibility. Because earlier some of the companies were saving money by not sending because the huge costs were there, but now there's hardly any cost. So the terms of reference of this committee is getting reduced day by day. So therefore, my humble submission is we need to include more and more terms of reference as far as this committee is concerned. Then come to that this committee shall meet once in a year. Why once in a year? Is that the importance which has been given to this committee that she shall be meeting? Because this committee is, again, I'm repeating the name, Stakeholders Relationship Committee. What sort of relationship we are going to maintain with our stakeholders? If we are meeting once a year, that's all. There's a minimum requirement. But as Mr. Subramaniam displayed before us, I've seen the number of large companies, and Mr. Rajendra Kumar also suggested that a number of good companies, they are meeting at least once in a quarter. I think that should be the minimum requirement for this committee. Then coming to the next issue, as Dr. S.K. Gupta, you also said that triple bottom approach, it should be adopted by this committee also. And I'm happy to note that you have included the fourth P also, that is pandemic. In addition to people, planet, and prosperity, you include pandemic also. And this committee needs to take care of this pandemic or any other pandemic which may be there.
I know.
There may be some other virus also, not in the form of illness, but maybe
Absolutely.
any other financial. There may be some digital virus, there will be some financial
Yes.
virus also. Then my another observation is that nowadays it has become a practice, and I'm happy to note that, and I'm thankful to proxy advisory firms. We have Mr. Subramaniam here with us, that they are analyzing the notices of the general meetings as well as the annual reports, which are being shared with the shareholders. And then on the basis of that, they are suggesting that whether one particular resolution should be voted upon or should be voted against, whether it should be voted in favor or voted against. If a particular resolution is being voted against by majority of the public shareholders, it is immaterial whether the resolution is getting passed or not. I'm not on that. But I am on this, if number of majority of shareholders, in public shareholder, retail shareholder are voting against the resolution, it means they are not happy with that particular resolution, with that particular decision, which the board has recommended to be approved by the shareholders. Now, such a report of the proxy advisory, according to me, should be put before this committee. This committee should go into that, why this proxy advisory has given this mandate or this advisory, that why this resolution should be voted against. It means there are certain inherent deficiencies. Stakeholder Relations Committee must go into that, and then these issues should be taken to the board. The recommendation of SRC should be put before the board. that why certain recommendations were there, advisory was there from proxy advisory firms. And my humble submission is that proxy advisory reports should be tabled before the stakeholders relationship committee. Now, my next suggestion is it should be analyzed by the stakeholder relationship committee that actually what they have done during the year to improve the relationship with the stakeholders. What efforts have actually been taken by this committee? Have they educated their stakeholders? Have they created the awareness amongst the stakeholders?
Very important.
Whether they have apprised the stakeholders about the latest developments in the company as well as in the industry as a whole. Whether they have apprised the stakeholder what are the advantages and impact of latest developments which are happening in the company or in the economy as a whole. I think it should be the duty of the stakeholder relationship committee to apprise and to take note of all these issues. Another suggestion from my side is that all the stock exchange queries, observations should be put before stakeholder relationship committee. Number of times stockholders, stock exchanges and SEBI are asking many questions and queries. I think that should be put before the stakeholder relationship committee. They have right to know that. In my view, stakeholder relationship committee also has a right to know what are the total filings by the company with the various stock exchanges during the previous quarter or previous month.
Yes.
All those filings should be there before SSC should know that whether all the timings have been on time or not, whether adequate disclosures have been made to the stock exchanges or not, whether proper book closure recorded intimation has been given to the stock exchanges or not. My other suggestion is that is there any allegation either by SEBI or stock exchange or in the social media about any insider trading happening in the shares of the company? This should also go to stakeholders relationship committee. I'm not going to take the name of a company, but what is happening, but that I've observed in a number of companies, Dr. Gupta, that a company is declaring its date of the board meeting for the purposes of approval of the financial statement and declaration of and recommendation of dividend. The board meeting date is fixed. The moment the date is fixed, very next day we see the impact of this, just simple this notification.
Yeah.
We see the impact on the price.
Yeah.
And I tell you exactly what is going to be the amount of the dividend and what shall be the record date for payment of dividend if factored in very next day. Prior to the holding of the board meeting.
Wow.
How come that is happening? And I have observed during this week itself in one of the largest companies of the country. I'm not going to name it. Exact amount of dividend has been factored in the F&O price of that company. And on the basis of the record date, and I was really surprised when the price, there was fluctuation in price, and when the date has been announced, I was really surprised. How come these market pundits, they know that what is going to be the record date? Whether such issues are not going to, shouldn't go to record the stakeholders relationship committee. If I'm not exceeding the time, I would like to take another 2-3 minutes, Dr. Gupta, if you.
Sure, sir. Please carry on.
One thing I'm really happy about this, that on 5th of May 2021, SEBI has come out with amendment that as far as SRC is concerned, the disclosure by this SRC shall cover the number of complaints not solved to the satisfaction of the shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy about this amendment.
Yeah.
So it's not that they are giving the figures that how many complaints in the beginning, the added during the year, resolved and pending at the end of the year, but how many number of complaints which have not been resolved to the satisfaction of the shareholders.
That's critical.
Provided we are giving not only the number, but all the reasons also, that what are the reasons of non-satisfaction of the shareholders. But I hope that disclosure is still not there. I will be happy if that is included by SEBI in the LODR. Next one from my side is IEPF. Is unclaimed dividend or unclaimed shares, if these details are tabled before SRC on periodical basis. I think this committee has right to know about all this. One more submission is regarding the dividend policy of the company. I think in the terms of reference of SRC, this is not there. Why dividend policy should not be considered or monitored or when, if required, revised by SRC. I think that should be within the mandate of SRC. One suggestion, the second last suggestion, two more suggestions only from my side. Whenever a company is announcing a board meeting, date of the board meeting, wherever there is going to be some corporate action, why time of board meeting is not announced? I think that is very, very material. The time of the board meeting should also be announced. What time the board meeting is going to take place? What is harm there? If you're announcing the date and day, why not the time? Because there is no mandate. There is no mandate in LODR. That's why say we are not supposed to announce the time. But I think if this additional disclosure is what it is going to really help the stakeholders. Last but not the least is communication with the stakeholders. I think that should be in the very, very simple form, simple language, precise, crisp, while disclosing everything. I have one data with me, and that was interesting data. I have taken it from one of the proxy advisory firms only. One resolution is proposed before the shareholders for raising of additional capital. Now, you know, this resolution, which is part of the agenda of the board general meeting, this is in 3.5 pages. This resolution. The number of words which have been used in the resolution is 2,352. And the very first sentence of the resolution is in 786 words. One single sentence. 786 words, not letters. Now think of this. After reading this, if sentence is continuing and maybe one full page or quarter page is being taken over by consumed by this one single sentence, what are you going to understand? And I tell you, if you read the resolution, at the end of the resolution, you are not going to understand what the company is going to do. What is the security? What shall be the terms of the issue of the security? What shall be the rate? And the end of the बीच में पढ़ते अब छोड़ दोगे छोड़ यार मुझे नहीं पढ़ना है. I'll vote in favor of the resolution because against तो कोई करता नहीं. Either people vote in favor or they don't vote. Unless they receive the proxy advisory firm's advisory, they don't take it.
Imagine lawyers like you and company secretaries have put the language there. Imagine the plight of, find it difficult to read such a long resolution, then imagine the plight of ordinary people like
Mr.
me.
Mr. Brahmanam, let me tell you that in all my pleadings also, I always try to be very brief and my sentences are very, very short. I don't believe in long sentences, a typical language which is not able to be understood. So these were some of my suggestions.
Sure,
now I'll be part of the Q&A whenever you have it. Thank you
Sure,
so much.
sir. Thank you so much, Advocate GP Madan sir, for very insightful, practical suggestions from the ground level. You have seen all this in the corporate boards, and that's what you have shared. Some very, very minute details why the time of the board meeting could not be given. And very basic point, but till now it is not mandated by LODR, so companies are not providing for that. I think that's a time where we need to not only comply with the law, but actually start living the law. I mean, living the best practices, living the code of conduct, that's adopting the best practices because we are going international. This is an era of globalization. We are competing with best of the best companies in the world. And therefore, we need to adopt best practices as soon as possible, not only for flourishing our own businesses, our own companies, but also for helping India achieve a better status in terms of ease of doing business. We hope to be within top 50 very soon. Right now, we are at 63rd position in the EUDB. Thank you so much. So with that, we come to the panel discussion end of this particular afternoon deliberation. But then, of course, we have a session on Q&A now. Any queries from the participants? I mean, the panelists are all there. You can ask any query from them, and probably they'll be able to answer to you with best of their wisdom and best of their knowledge. So the floor is open for participation by the participants who are joining online. Any queries that you may have from any one of the panelists, you can share that query either unmute yourself and speak out, or you can put it down in the
Dr.
chat.
Gupta, I don't think they have a right to unmute. Mr. Santosh will
Okay,
clarify
okay,
whether they have
okay.
a right to
So
unmute.
they can only write in the chat box. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
Sure.
right on the chat box. In the meantime, you can go ahead and you can raise the queries.
No,
Till the time we see the queries in the chat box.
I know. As of now, there's no query as such. There are some observations which we have already discussed. It's an era of digitalization where transfer of shares, dividend payment, everything happens on digital basis. So those days are gone when there used to be number of plethora of complaints and grievances from the customers and the shareholders. Now in this digital world, all those kind of routine grievances are no longer there. I mean, there are some observations of this kind which are mentioned in the chat box, but no specific question as up to now. So I would again request the participants to kindly share your perspective, any observations, any questions which the panelists would be able to respond to the best of their knowledge and wisdom.
Or in the meantime, if I ask our panelist, maybe Dr. M. Narendra, what is his experience as a member, if he's a member of any of the stakeholder relationship committee, what is his experience by dealing with the other directors and how the board perceive it?
Yeah.
Whether this, how much importance is given to this committee in the corporates?
नहीं बदर साहब, इसलिए हमने अभी क्या क्या बताया था वो सब मेरा पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस वेयर आई एम द मेंबर और व्हाट यू कॉल इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर. और ऐसा भी था सम ऑफ द कमिटी में आई गो as a invitee and I am not the independent director there, and there are other two independent directors, and I saw the company has also taken note of that, and the next meeting that suggestion is again implemented. So any progressive company or a company which values the what you call stakeholders interest or the equity or the debenture holders or the investors interest should be able to be a transparent and provide all the such information to the committee level, and the committee can also proactively look into that. And as you rightly said, today with the digitalization and transparency and all, quite a lot of things get sorted there only. Now what can be other one is, as you rightly said, because like I even in another area which I forgot to mention today, we have suggested that how far your company, the CFO and the other executive directors and the other authorized people, they are able to meet the institutional shareholders or the general shareholders in the quarterly what you call the shareholder meeting, where they call and make analysts meet, and also the analysts also. And in fact we also suggest that they should be in touch with the Subramanya Kumar who is having a independent assessment. We have suggested if there are good suggestion that coming out of them in relation to any company, I am not telling about any specific company, that also should be valued, and you should be able to provide them information, and you should be able to also invite some of the leading shareholders or some of the specific shareholders, or sometimes even in the annual general body meeting a few shareholders may continuously wish that we would like to come to your head office or where we would like to meet and interact, not on a what you call, but if there are specific if they would like to meet also. So I have, as a is a chairman of the bank, also listed bank, we have quite a lot of shareholders want to talk they are wanting them to be recognized in terms of maybe appreciation, maybe some what you call very negative feedback also, not the positive itself. And as a chairman, when I am addressing later all that, I have to reply to that, and they get very much satisfied, even in conducting a AGM and satisfying all of them who are able to earlier, maybe now today in the technology they give the information in advance, so they are selected, and they are selected in the sense according to they have followed the guideline and they talk. But physical meeting, again we have to recognize them, and they have to talk, and an opportunity given, and all the data and other things which could be shared at the same moment we do that, and if there are any other information, we send it to them. And as you rightly said, even the MD or the chairman of the board or should be able to send some over and above this quarterly report and all, something on the company, how the company is, what are the initiatives they are taking, including that ESG which is mentioned. Today, the shareholders would like to be with the company which is ESG, implemented company. That is where the ESG, the business response report, and the ESG initiatives and ESG policies now all are taking place, because even the international investors and international equity and debenture, they would like to give only to the such company which are ESG compliant.
Yeah.
So these are all being taken care, sir, and we are really doing that.
Dr. Narendra, I have a couple of questions to you.
Yeah.
That you are a hardcore banker. Don't you think that banks and financial institutions should be stakeholders as far as this committee is concerned? Number one. And number two, whether the borrowings, the fresh borrowings or fresh investments, in addition to the audit committee, should not be routed through stakeholder relationship committee also.
Yeah, that is where I mentioned that any bond issuance of secured or unsecured, that comes to this committee. Now, as you rightly said, the overall borrowings of the company is also monitored at the top board level as well as in the other committees, and there within that, particularly the individual borrowing, incremental borrowing, all that done in during that particular quarter are also monitored. But as a right for information to the stakeholder interest, this committee, if it is asked, I'm sure the progressive management will furnish that to this committee also. And as you rightly said, I think the amendment to the Companies Act, I think 2020, today quite a lot of disclosures are asked. And these disclosure could have come even as a proactive management also, in the way, like, when I was in Corporation Bank, we tried our best to give so many disclosure, as well as we prepared our balance sheet of the bank in the US GAAP, even though it was not required, and we published that balance sheet just like other annual report 5 years, and we did that. Later, of course, these guidelines merged with that. So your point is, whenever a banker wishes to be there to know about the overall relationship of the stakeholders, I think the company, in a way, by the statutory, if it comes, that is okay, because around 75% of the interest in any company, if they are borrowed to that extent, the bank or the financial institution becomes really part of the equity or part of the interest in that company. And I have been always mentioning that those companies take some of the core and non-core decision. If it is not known to the banks are definitely at a greater risk. So this is where there are certain permission which they require, they ask, but there are quite a lot of risk. Even though banks are complied with the risk, the other side, what they do, some of the decision may not be in favor of the company bank's interest. So that also can be done only. That is where some of the bigger loans and institutional term loan, we have the nominee director of the such development financial institution, including LIC, first IDB, and even the bigger bank now through consortium approach, they can nominate directors, not merely when it becomes sick, even prior to that. So that also will get quite a lot of, because they have to give the report back to the institution, what were the various proceedings in that meeting.
Right. I have one
Thank you.
observation in the chat box, and someone is asking, what is the role of training and learning of independent directors for this committee? So he's giving an example. Suppose there is any latest Supreme Court or High Court decision which impacts the company and the stakeholders. So the directors should be able to understand that and communicate that to the stakeholders. So what is the role of training and learning of independent directors for this particular committee? Madan sir, can you please respond to this?
So as far as training and learning is concerned, I'll leave it to the exclusive domain of nomination and
Okay,
recommendation
okay.
committee. Not to SRE, but yes, as far as the impact of any Supreme Court or High Court decision, certainly that can be communicated, and there can be a policy that without going to the committee, that should be communicated to the stakeholders. And as per LODR, I think that is also required to be disclosed to the stock exchanges also.
That's fine. I mean, that's a
Maybe-
basic limit that for all committees, wherever you appoint independent directors, the committees must be fairly familiar with the terms of reference, what they are expected to do, what is their role, and whatever training or additional knowledge inputs are required to be provided, that are required to be provided, that should be provided by the company with due coordination and necessary action from the company secretary of the company. So it
So,
applies to
Gupta-
all the committees, including the stakeholder relationship committee. Yes, Mr.
Gupta-
Subramaniam.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gupta,
my-
sir. Yeah, please call. Yeah, mention.
So my interaction with independent directors of large companies also, they generally say that whenever they have requested any new inputs or they need to enhance their knowledge in any specific area, the companies are more than happy to engage even external advisors or external training or inputs for these directors, even of large companies, because these days training and this one is not just there are so many new topics, cybersecurity, this meta, etc., etc. So directors need to be kept abreast of them and how to spare in a short period of time, gain knowledge, or at least what is the impact on the company. So that holds good for even the SRC committee or even all other committees also. Depends on what is relevant in the context of the committee or the company itself, and what impact these newer trends have on the company.
Yeah. That's what
Mr.
I was
Narendra,
also.
Dr.
That
Narendra,
was
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was I was telling that one is initial familiarization by separate one type of induction or whatever course of the relative activities of company. There will be a lot of available some training program that can be sent. Second, the committees can always call for some expert opinion, and the experts can be called to make a presentation also, as he rightly said. And within the organization also, there are multifunctional heads who have a specialized knowledge on that, irrespective of that person, key management person, or even a lower than that. He may not report to this. We have commissioned so many such people to come and make a presentation. Recently, we had one presentation on ESG, on a very detailed by an expert advisor who, for the corporate also he works. He gave that to us. So that awareness has to be done. And I found now in each of the meeting, what are the role play of that committee members relating to that committee with the detail again gets presented, and we have to minute it that we have gone through that and we are familiar with that. This is in every committee meeting now, as per the, I don't know, SEBI or something. So we are reminded of our role each and every meeting by again going through the fully. So if you have any doubt about your role, you must again ask for some more expert opinion, so that as you said, every independent actor need to be aware of all that facets.
Right. There's another query on the chat box. I think that's the last one which we can probably take. Someone is asking, in the 3 P's, people, profit, planet, what is the role of SRC in the area of planet? I mean, let me share first my perspective and then it can be supplemented by my other co-panelists. I think today we are looking at global warming. We are looking at political, the planet is really very important concern for all the corporate entities. We are looking at green finance. Many companies have issued green bonds, both in the public and the private sector organization. Climate change is taking place at a very rapid pace. You have United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Actually, when you talk about planet, we're talking about the entire humanity as our stakeholder. It's the broadest possible term to be used in the context of a stakeholder for that matter. And of course, every company is required to be accountable, to be responsible for behaving properly with the planet, because all of us have got just one planet to live on. And we have also a moral responsibility of leaving the planet in the same shape and form for our future generation as we inherited from our forefathers. Now, you may kindly supplement on these few comments that I've made. Yeah.
My answer to this is that society is the largest stakeholder in a company, in a corporate. And if we don't take care of this society, then certain society is what? Society constitutes, the planet constitutes societies only. If we don't take care of our own society, it means we are not taking care of our own planet. It means we are failing in our duty. But for that, I will again say that we need to increase our horizon. We have to widen the definition of stakeholder and not remain confined to debenture holders or shareholder or other security holders.
Absolutely.
Just to add to what both of you have said, I think it should also be seen in the context of the size and resources of the company. I mean, obviously, a startup company will only think about revenues and the like. It is like a hungry man will only think about food, whereas probably a much richer man will think about wealth and etc. etc. So I think the responsibility, the larger the company becomes, the more responsible the company should be. I think so. From that perspective, Indian companies, of course, need to step up also from these perspectives, whether they care for example, I think India sorely lacks now fresh water. I think so soon we'll be staring at water shortages. Industries which are consuming large amounts of water, they need to be focusing more on those fronts, etc. So I think the responsibility is that of larger companies, and of course, the smaller the companies, at least they have to do what within the limited means they can do.
Right. So I think we have had a very fruitful, intellectually stimulating discussion on this very important team, stakeholder relationship committee, because the key to corporate governance is to conduct business in a way that shareholders' rights and interests are duly adequately protected. It is important that organization realizes that it is impossible to satisfy all stakeholders. We understand practically. However, it is best to create a balance between meeting organizational objectives and that of the stakeholders. With that note, I thank all my co-panelists for their very, very intellectually stimulating discussion and deliberation. Thank you so much, all the participants. Thank you, all the organizers. I hand over the mic to Mr. Santosh Parashar for his concluding remarks, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, S.K. Gupta sir, and to all the eminent panelists. I would apologize, in fact, because I was switching intermittently from this meeting to another meeting, which was also focusing on the corporate governance perspective with SEBI. So I was with my co-representatives in that meeting, and over the period, this subject of corporate governance and towards particularly protection of the investor has come very close to my heart, and I am trying my level best.
Santoshji, probably you were real time transferring all the inputs from here to SEBI there.
Yeah.
Exactly, sir. So I'm trying my level best. And I would just learn from Madan sir, precisely the point that you mentioned, the 700 few words where the sentence ends. I would love to learn that sentence, sir.
I'll share it with you.
Yeah.
So nice, sir. If you can please share. And to take a few concluding remarks from this discussion, I would just say that long sentences are unreadable, of course. Stakeholders, sometimes they do not have thoughts, or maybe they do not have voice to speak, or if they are acting on their part, but are they being heard or not is important. If they are being heard, then at what time, at what date, or if the action is being taken or not, then therefore this corporate governance symposium was being thought in mind, where my colleague Vikas Bardwan, he's very much with me, who shared his thought that, sir, we should go for this entire subject, we undertake and discuss in parts, in these ways where we organize the activities on the effective implementation of the overall corporate governance frameworks that we are supposed to be doing so. I will just take one example, sir, here in context of investor protection. I used to, have the use of the Delhi Metro card. While I used to recharge, one of the digital payment service provider, I was using their services. and that company offered some cashback. So I stored the cashback of around 300 rupees in my wallet. And on the day when this was supposed to be, being transferred to my wallet, the scheme was closed on the same day. And then this company came with IPO, which was overly subscribed, and people were, questioning whether to buy or not to buy. But I just shared my experience, which was not of the question of the 300 rupees amount, but as a whole, it was indicating me that somewhere is wrong with the corporate governance. Interestingly, I wrote emails to that company and the promoters that this is something what has been wrong with part of your company or the person who are dealing with this amount of 300 rupees. Is it what I am eligible for or not? Then they excused, requested pardon, and then they offered me 168 rupees out of 300 to please settle this and close the complaint. So ultimately, I said that this is not the question of 300, but somewhere we are heading to the majorly the corporate governance, which is in question. So either you give 300 or don't give. I don't bother at all. But ultimately, what happened? That company has been, badly performed in the IPO. People have lost. People have lost. And here, I would not mind sometimes that in my organization, people may be questioning that why do I speak a lot about these? Maybe that the company is a member of my chamber. So, but since this is the subject which I am supposed to be talking or getting your expertise, opinions, inputs, and which of course the major stakeholders largely in the chamber, they can get benefited out of this. So I keep sharing and learning from you expert and luminaries of the subject of the corporate governance. Will keep on maybe disturbing you, interrupting you, and will request to keep joining us for such kind of the program which are focusing on corporate governance in the next financial year, going on ongoing financial year as well. And thank you so much for joining this particular series. And we are coming up with all the discussions so far we have taken into in this series for over 5 activities. So we are planning to come out with the proceeding in physical form. Will come out with each and every critical component and your highlighted points in other meetings over 5 in the series as well. With all your good photographs, I would come back to you and request that please do provide your photographs. Will come out.
Sure.
And thank you so much all the participants who are attending this, and look forward to your continued participation. Thank you everyone. Sri Ram sir, thank you Naren sir, thank you Rajendra sir.
Thank you,
Dr. S.K. Gupta sir. Thank you so much. Thank you my team Jatin and Vikas Bardhabar.
Thank you very much for all of you, and आप बहुत अच्छा करते हैं. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.